Godbreakers is a 3D hack-and-slash roguelike developed by To The Sky and published by Thunderful Publishing, who you may know for having published the SteamWorld series of games, Say No More, Viewfinder, and Laika. The game's name started flying around the Risk of Rain 2 modding community around mid-2025, since an infamous YouTuber named Wooly had managed to play a run of the demo for Godbreakers with the devs. The game's defining gimmick is its name, Godbreaking, which allows you to insta-kill an enemy with a damaging explosion and steal a power from it by filling this little meter down in the corner. The armor system was robust with a lot of variety, and had a very interesting art style and themes, ranging from a flaming forge of meat people to this really cool-looking sludge planet. I was lucky enough that a friend had offered to buy it for me on launch day, October 23rd, and I completely finished it with the true ending and unlocked almost every skin at the time in only 2 days after launch. But after completing the game and sitting on it for a while, my opinion on it has really soured. Like a perfectly good glass of milk left out in the hot summer sun. Okay, let me explain. At the beginning of a run, you start in a hub. The game calls this place Sargassus. You choose a weapon, choose its skill, choose a few cosmetics, maybe select a run modifier or two from this little pillar off to the side, then set off on your journey to the final boss. At the beginning of the run, you're forced to make a choice between one of two starting planets. You beat the boss of the chosen planet, then make another choice between two more planets. You beat the planet you chose there, and are locked into the next and penultimate planet. Once the boss is slain, you immediately move on to the final boss at the sun. During runs, you'll gain these little armor pieces, known as fragments. These provide various passive benefits from leech healing effects to giving you buffs when you backstab an enemy. They're the bread and butter of any run since they have some of the most diverse and powerful effects in the game. You can also find these little small glowing orbs occasionally dropped by enemies in chests. These are essences, and these are more passive buffs like an increase to crit chance, an increase to a certain damage type, or just a chance to apply a status ailment on hit. You can also get your hands on little extra skills like traps, grenades, or more utility-focused abilities. Not bad, quite useful in different sets since there's a wide array of effects to use, such as decay, poison, and burn. Every so often in a planet you'll encounter these little yellow ring objects, or this flying cube. These are challenges that can grant you a fragment, some essences, and a bit of healing. These challenges are usually worth doing and occasionally offer a nice change of pace from the combat of the planets. Halfway through the stage, you'll encounter a sub-boss. Each level is guaranteed to have an encounter with its sub-boss. After a few more rooms, once you've beaten the sub-boss, you'll meet this cube-headed guy. This is Ergos. He's your shopkeeper. He'll sell you things for dust, this game's in-game currency. Dust is gained from enemy drops or recycling fragments and skills. Once you finish shopping, you can take on the major boss of the level and move on. Now that you know how the game likes to repeat itself, it's about time we move on and take a look at where exactly each boss is hiding. Let's shift on over to the... Godbreakers has 5 planets to pick from, and they try to make up for a lack of its content with a stellar variety of planets. That is, they are stellar until you see them for the 17th time in a row. Found on each planet is the Pinecone family of enemies. They appear in almost every fight and seem to exist mostly to be fuel for your god breaks and your skills. They can be annoying, especially spitters, lickers, and wreckers, but they're surfaceable at best. First up is the sand planet, It's claimed that beneath your feet, the sand has taught itself to think, forming glass spheres of electricity, known only as knowledge orbs. These dot the walls and the grounds of Around the place, you'll find data tendrils, which will burst out of the ground and stun you, glass orbs that will zap things around them, and logo scrap that doesn't really do anything but sit there. When it comes to monsters, has 3 to face off with that emerge from the sand, or emerge from balls of light. They really could have lent to giving enemies unique spawn animations. That would have made them so cool. Skimmers scuttle up to you and slap you, divers will lunge at you, or dive into the ground and jump back up with their sandburst skill, and pulsars just swap out the sandburst for a slow, crawling ball lightning skill. In the middle, you'll encounter the Compiler, a previous skull of that had been picked up by an oversized glass orb. Its attacks include burrowing and bursting, biting you, headbutt lunges, or performing a familiar little rolling attack. At half HP, it'll flee to the center of the arena and protect itself with a shield, spawning a handful of enemies and charging a massive sandburst. Afterwards, it'll resume its usual attack pattern, When you Godbreak it, you get its Shell Shield skill, which is the exact same shield it used in the middle of its fight, granting temporary invulnerability followed by a powerful explosion. Alternatively, if you don't want to go to you can go to Merrick. Merrick is a labyrinth of basalt, stone, and odd vein-like pipes that bellow fire from the earth. Huge statues of hands and legs sprout from burning hot lava, covered in weaved muscle. The odd creatures here seem to be made of the same material and hobble about in a constant battle with one another. Here you'll find basalt fists, which fall from above and crush things, rage knots that explode, and brass gongs that give a damage bonus if you hit them with a charged attack. When you enter into combat, 3 enemies are here to greet you. Short fuses, which run up to you and then explode, not that much there. Strong arms will hobble up to either perform a little combo, or they'll perform their power punch skill, launching them forwards in a quick burst of speed. And haymakers just trade the power punch for their whirlwind skill. Midway through, you'll fight the Gladiator, this massive humanoid muscle beast carrying a sword and shield made of rock. It attacks mostly with sword strikes, belly bites, little shockwaves, and this oddly janky-looking leap. At a certain point during its fight, it'll use its Savage Cry skill to empower all of its allies. You can Godbreak it for this Savage Cry skill, which gives you basically the same effect. Once or Merrick are defeated, you get the option to either go to Sabawath or Astafane. Both of these are a noticeable step up from the starting point and offer their own challenges and headaches to deal with. Sabawath is the dead remains of what was once a very beautiful and life-filled planet. However, the giant slug occupying it was tasked to remove death from things, and once he did, he had to violently and viciously reintroduce suffering and pain back into the ecosystem, but it was already ruined. Here you'll find his experiments: germicidal eradicators, which cleanse debuffs, auto-injectors, which create these hourglass-shaped bursts of poisonous needles, and macroviruses, which grant a stack of Rampage and a stack of Doom. Compared to other planets, Sabawath only has 2 monsters as of writing this script. The Urchin will just move to a random point, hunker down, and then emit a burst of poisonous needles all around it, and the Wretch will hobble up to you to perform either a light headbutt, or it'll use its injection skill to slide forward in the form of a wave of needles. Halfway through, you'll encounter the Dredger. This hulk of slime and sludge will slide across the arena, swinging its head around to deal damage at close range, but can also create a multi-directional poison needle burst. It can spawn wretches and urchins, and temporarily cloak itself in thorns, causing you to take damage when attacking up close. Godbreaking it gives you its Thorn Shield skill, which is a short burst of needles that allow you to damage enemies that attack you. Astafane is an artificial garden made by its insectoid queen to try and cultivate organic life, at the request of its overlord. But unfortunately, she decided to deviate from the plan, creating her own gigantic garden to produce her own life. Here you'll run into tendril plants that will snare you, light traps that fire a spread of 3 lasers when you hit them, and parasitic vines which can be broken to gain a guaranteed critical hit. Don't break them, they really aren't worth it. Now, Astafane has 3 monsters unlike Sabawath. The Ballistica are these little worms that just kind of shoot at you. Ovipara will either bite you or spit up a line of egg mines which slow and damage things that hit them, and the Rayfin just replaces the egg mines with a plasma burst. It's kind of cool. The mini-boss is the Gardener. She has a more projectile-focused moveset compared to other mini-bosses. Yeah, she can claw at you, but she prefers to stay back, firing walls or rings of slow-moving bullets or producing a massive slowing AoE field to make it tough to attack her. She'll also summon swarms of Ballistica. Godbreaking her gives you its Bad Seed skill, which summons a swarm of Ballistica for a short period of time that rapidly gun down enemies. Once you beat your 2 chosen planets, you're locked into one final planet before the final boss encounter, Karaya. This elusive planet is constructed of a multitude of flying islands, which soar the toxicant-filled skies in search of various stimulative experiences. Ignore the jellyfish and the sky eye, I don't know why they're here. It has some really basic interactables. The upper gland, which grants the Empower effect, the downer gland, which grants the Enfeeble effect, and the converter gland, which inverts whatever stat-altering effects are on something, like turning Accelerate into Slow. There's only 2 monsters on Karaya, but one of them comes in 5 variants. The Leaper will jump onto you and slow you while dealing a smidgen of damage. It's not a threat. Modulators are these weird humanoids that dash around and claw at you, or they'll construct this pillar of light and crush it to spread a status effect. This changes between the types of modulators. The Synthesist is the mini-boss of this planet, fought in this very unique arena with these odd pillars dotting the ground. The Synthesist will warp and drift around the arena, unleashing either claw swipes or a cone-shaped burst of multicolored light. When it lifts this orb into the sky, it'll mark all players before causing an aerial strike from above, where the only method to dodge is to keep moving. When reaching half HP, the Synthesist will summon a swarm of enemies and begin casting its Empowering Aura skill, creating a ball of light that links to allied monsters and enemies, and after a short duration, it's crushed to apply either Enfeeble to enemies or Empower to allies. God-breaking it will grant you this exact same skill. Now that you've encountered all 5 planets, with all these weird monsters to fight and all these hazards to avoid, what are you supposed to do about it? Well, that's a problem solved by an age-old pastime. A little bit of gladiatorial. In Godbreakers, you have a few different options for combat, with 7 total weapons to pick from and each harboring around 3 unique skills to pull off. The Lancer, Pillar, Twin Blades, Duelist, Reaper, Striker, and Savage Blade are here to be used in the heat of combat. Each weapon has a primary combo and a secondary combo. Your primary combo is swift and deals moderate damage, but the secondary combo is slower and deals more damage than the primary. By pressing the secondary attack button in the middle of a primary attack combo, you can perform a combo attack that deals intense damage. By holding the secondary attack button, you can prepare a charged attack, which deals a large amount of damage in a single strike. It's pretty alright and can be improved on with various fragments that have charge-oriented effects. Weapons also come with various passives, which give an idea as to what their specific builds and gimmicks are. Lancer builds 20% more energy for God-breaking than most other weapons. Pillar gains stacks of Quake when it lands secondary attacks, which are spent to increase the power of its charge attack. Twin Blades have a higher chance to crit on a backstab. Duelist's attacks have a chance to generate ammo used for its secondary attacks and long-range shots. The Reaper's attacks have a chance to generate these little lights over your head called Sentinels, which shoot at enemies. Striker can perform different attacks with different combos of primary and secondary, making it quite a versatile fighter. And the Savage Blade gains a stack of Berserk when taking damage, and at max stacks gets an attack speed bonus and a leeching effect. Each weapon also has 3 special attacks you can use, so there's a fair bit of variety on how you want to play the game. Skills range from the Striker's Totem, which applies buffs in a very wide radius, to the Duelist's Minefield skill. You've got a fair few options here to use. God-breaking is the main combat gimmick, as using it can clear out or soften up groups of enemies, and the skills you usually get from enemies can easily take out or severely weaken enemies, and each of them fill different niches, like healing, crowd control, or single-target destruction. But now that you've gotten a handle on the basic combat and the biomes, we gotta get to the real meat and potatoes of this game. Godbreakers has around 6 bosses to fight, many of which are found at the ends of the different planets, sharing names with each of them. All the bosses have varying amounts of difficulty, and some are certainly much tougher than others. Takes on the form of a titanic skull, decorated with glass orbs, gold filament, and old cloths. Isn't a hard boss. In fact, compared to everyone, he's kinda easy. He starts with a large shield and attacks by summoning giant tendrils, which slam onto the ground. Damaging the glass orbs in between the tendrils will eventually shatter his shield, scattering the shards into 3 points around the arena. You'll then need to hide behind these large shards in order to avoid his sandburst attack. Then he'll lay vulnerable for a bit before regenerating his shield and summoning a small handful of enemies. He'll then rise back up and continue to fight. In his second phase, data tendrils will begin to dot the arena. In his third phase, he'll begin firing massive electric beams at every player in the arena. Merrick is a humanoid entity made entirely of muscle, with 4 arms and a wrestler-like getup. He's also noticeably much more difficult than mostly because of how much more mobile he is compared to the huge head floating in a literal sandy wasteland. Merrick marches up to you and unleashes various close-range attacks, such as wide-reaching swipes, ground slams, flying tackles, or if you're behind him, he'll fall on you and try to crush you. He also has this attack where he cartwheels around and eventually tries to perform a people's elbow on you. When reducing his HP to transition phases, he'll try and jump into the center of the arena and begin pounding it, summoning basalt fists. A lot of his attacks will also begin to leave behind flaming circles in phase 3. This is very anti-melee and can make the fight a bit tough for a lot close-range builds, such as the backstabs of the Twin Blades. Saboath is this large slug-like entity that resides at the end of the undead husk of rock he calls his planet. During his fight, he'll use various melee attacks and hide under the ground to turn into a series of noxious thorns that sprout from the ground and chase players. When transitioning phases, Saboath will situate himself in the center of the arena and produce large hourglass-shaped bursts of needles. Saboath's main gimmick is that he'll summon monsters to support him during combat, but when performing his jumping attack that produces these toxic sludge waves, he'll destroy any monsters they hit and leave behind a poison needle puddle, and he'll gain a stack of urchin. He'll gain 1 stack from killing a single urchin and 3 from killing a wretch, and each stack boosts his movement speed by 1. He'll also begin to perform his slam wave attack more often as his stacks of urchin increase. Astaphane is the large insect-like entity found at the end of the artificial garden of her planet, and she behaves pretty similar to the gardener. Her primary attack consists of warping around and firing arrays of projectiles, either in rings or walls. But she also has this large AoE slam attack, and if you're close to her, she'll fire an explosive shot straight into the ground. When transitioning phases, she'll coat the arena in tendril plants, the very annoying gimmick. However, during her fight, she'll summon swarms of Ballistica, and for each Ballistica you kill, this meter under her HP bar will begin to fill by 1 for each one killed. When her meter maxes out, she'll roar and she'll disappear before eventually returning into this crawler form. While in this form, Astaphane will perform more melee-like techniques like leaping slams, or just driving her shelled bits into the ground, much similar to her slam attack. During this phase, she'll also perform a leaping move, which will cause shockwaves to crawl across the arena floor. Very dangerous, especially combined with the snare plants. Kar and Aya are a very odd pair of cloaked entities with multiple eyes, various limbs, and tongue hair. Kar is the orange one with the large club and active movement, while Aya is the somewhat emo-looking one with the weird flesh tube arms. Remember that now. You always fight these two at once, and they have their own moves to look out for. Kar is more melee focused, with mace slams, spinning flurries, status-altering pulses, and an attack where they'll throw up the mace and wait for it to slam before dashing into it to grab it. If Kar dashes into Aya, they'll both become stunned and left open. Aya has ranged focused attacks, such as launching arced balls of light energy, firing a light strike, or slamming the ground to get you to back off. One of Aya's most notable attacks is to charge, then fire a long, piercing beam that stuns itself and Kar if it manages to hit its counterpart. When transitioning phases, Kar and Aya flow up and open this starry wall and summon a large group of enemies. While fighting, this star wall produces walls made of a multicolored tile. These just kind of sweep the arena, and if you touch them, you take damage. Whenever one of them is defeated, the other will become enraged, moving much faster and maintaining this star wall for the rest of the match. They aren't hard, but can be easily overwhelming or hard to keep track of, which is almost fitting for their style. The Monad is the final boss of the game, taking on the form of a muscular humanoid with a dark floating orb over his shoulders instead of a head. It's concealed in a dark haze and it's made of an unknown material. Fought right in front of the sun, the Monad is a true test of one's skills. Sort of. He's not a hard fight, but he's certainly tough. He's also a pretty big spectacle, especially for the fight. He has a lot of moves, such as a close-range swipe, a burst of 3 long-range lasers, a flying drop followed by a huge explosion, a dashing uppercut, or summoning an exploding star on top of your character. When transitioning phases, the Monad will prepare a massive AoE burst, kind of like when his shield is broken, and a bubble of safety will appear on one of the 3 circles in the arena. You can hide in this bubble to avoid taking damage from the burst. However, with every phase, he'll burst once more, so once on phase 1, twice on phase 2, 3 times on phase 3. Once this attack is over, he'll summon a swarm of enemies, beginning with a bunch of pine cones but eventually turning into a diver, a strong arm, a wretch, and an ovipara. For some reason, no modulator. The last major attack of the Monad is to summon an arc pattern orb and incur its aspect, which has a unique effect based off each boss. The aspect of fires a series of electric beams at all players in the arena. The aspect of Merrick summons a series of basalt fists from above in various patterns. The aspect of Saboath creates a massive hourglass-shaped burst of needles from the ground. The aspect of Astaphane strikes random spots on the arena to create massive shockwaves. And the aspect of Karius summons the Star Wall, which launches rainbow grid walls. Fun fact, the walls of this attack are shorter than the arena, so standing at the very edge lets you dodge these with no effort. The Monad is a bit of a spectacle fight. He's not the toughest thing, but he's very flashy. A lot of action frames too, it's kind of impressive. But the Monad's trying to do something, and you won't exactly understand what exactly until you look into the game's Now, the story of Godbreakers is a bit fuzzy on me, but it goes something like this. In the beginning of everything, humans had created an AI in an attempt to solve all of their problems. This was the Monad. The Monad had realized that humans were a problem to solve, so it completely wiped all of them off the face of the universe. In its conquest to create the ultimate stagnant reality, it seized the arc patterns and created the Hylarians, machine gods who would fulfill different requests of the Monad, from assembling a body to protecting ancient information storages. However, in order to do all this, the Monad needs intense amounts of power, but it knows just how to get this energy. Just eat the fucking sun, I guess. That's when these big cloaked ladies, or the Coven, gets involved. They don't want the sun to be eaten, but they know the Monad is a man-made horror beyond their comprehension. So they drag a bunch of human souls from the afterlife, weave them new bodies, and force them to go fix the mess they made. The woven humans go and beat the Monad, but as they reach to the orb to kickstart humanity again, the Monad's orb explodes and kills them. But by getting the Hylarians to rebel against the Monad and ally with them, the woven humans defeat the Monad again, and with the united power of the Hylarians returning the humans' power back to them, the Monad's orb turns into a splitting egg cell, beginning humanity all over again. That should be everything. Hang on. What's that smell? Unfortunately, in every area that Godbreakers tries to shine, the moment you step back and look at it for a few seconds, the moment you realize that a bunch of these systems and ideas don't really work out how you'd hoped. Starting with the core loop, it's way too short. A run only takes 50 to 40 minutes, but it feels like it takes longer because of how often you have to wait for enemies to be in a situation to be hurt. The loop is unoriginal. I can name multiple games that have done what it's done. It's not unique or trying anything new. The game tries to artificially extend its length by having 500 cosmetic options to unlock, and the quests can take 1 to multiple runs to complete. Fuck you, Karaya. Fuck you. Fragments, essences, and skills are always random, meaning the game has no real builds and you're at the whims of its RNG. Some runs you may get every fragment you could ever need, but others you get fragments that you either don't need or fragments that replace ones you really need and end up recycling them. Essences also tend to either be useless or barely even useful, like chain lightning, explosion damage, or reflect chance. As cool as some of the planets are, like Merrick or Karaya, they don't do enough to warrant being memorable outside of their different aesthetics and bosses, since the reused pinecone enemies muddy up fights. Even then, there are so few unique enemies for each planet that the fights feel barely different from one another. The recent enemies they've been adding to the game are just reskins of pre-existing enemies with one new skill taped onto them. All you do on the planets is run from point A to point B and stop to mug a bunch of random monsters in each room before doing it all over again. The only exploration is occasionally looking back to see if there's a chest tucked behind a piece of level geometry or just sitting behind you under a ledge. There's an intense lack in variation on mini-bosses and stage layout. It's always either a somewhat short haul or a single room with barely any elevation. The combat just outright sucks. The game has so many weapons with slow or low damage attacks, and enemies don't take turns, they just swarm you from the moment they spawn. The weapons never improve, there's no upgrades for them outside of unlocking new skills that don't even deal any damage, and charge attacks are outright useless because of how every single enemy is melee based and loves to get right up in your face. Every weapon outside of the Striker and Twin Blades are genuinely tough to use, especially the Reaper because of its stupid sweet spot gimmick. During combat, you can easily be swarmed by large groups of enemies, and since your dash doesn't have iframes or let you face any monsters, if you get into a mosh pit here, you're effectively stuck until you clear a path for yourself or die trying. God-breaking sounds cool on paper, but in execution it's somewhat pointless. Even then, against the name of the game, for some reason you can't God-break the gods? The bosses are the only fun bit, yet the quality feels like it's flying around all over the place. Is piss easy compared to Merrick, Astavain is unreasonably tough and annoying to fight compared to Saboath, Kar and Aya are a very weird iteration of the 2-on-1 boss fight, and the Monad is the only cool boss in the whole game, and he's the final boss. The story feels almost non-existent. The only times it does exist is when the boss decides to talk to you through the weird boxes you find scattered in each area, and even then, all they say is archaic riddles. It tries to set up something with recruiting the Hylarians to your side, but the true ending is absolutely disappointing. It's just a slight change to the original ending, and it doesn't do anything new. There's no special scene of everything returning to normal, no scene of the Hylarian gods washing over the beginnings of humanity, no scene of the Coven returning to whatever their original business was. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing. This story blows. I was super excited for Godbreakers back when I found out about it. I thought it was going to be the Badger game, the one thing I'd always been hoping for so long. And here it is, being short as hell and super light on content. I have hopes and wishes that the game can improve, especially without some kind of huge DLC that adds like 2 new worlds and 1 new weapon for $15. Genuinely depressing when that's all you get for $15 attached to a $20 game. That's right, this game is $20. $20 for a, quote, finished game, unquote, that feels like it's an early access game in early access. But I'm sure you're already typing, but Mr. Badger, what about all the secrets? There's bound to be so many secrets in the game. I'll let you in on a fun little secret. I have shown you everything the game has to offer. Someday, I hope to look at this game and think, man, I remember when this thing was so light and tiny, but I don't think that'll be anytime soon. I'm getting riled up. I think I need to go wind down with some Cult of the Lamb or some Windblown. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good one, and stay radical.